Are you ready for a journey through the thrilling pages of sports history? Welcome to Daily Sports History, the podcast that takes you on an exhilarating sprint to the history books of athletic greatness. In under 10 minutes, we dive deep into the heart-pounding world of sports, from timeless classics to unforgettable underdogs, to stories of legendary athletes that define the game. So get on the edge of your seat, because our journey to the past is going to be exhilarating, one story at a time. So subscribe now to Daily Sports History.
Our Weird World.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson. I don't know how this episode's going to go. All right. I feel fine physically. Mentally, I feel fine, but I feel like I'm a little slow today. I feel like I'm a little foggy today. I have no idea why. I don't know, man. I don't know what would cause that. So we're going to try to get through this episode. I might just space off and I don't know. I might just sit in silence for a couple minutes while my brain catches up. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But talking about gangsters today, 4 stories of just some thug life, dog. Just what? I don't know. But here's the thing. Here's what's nice about this. See, I think this is how I imagine the rest of you are. You probably saw, oh man, this episode about gangsters. It's all black people. Nope. Nope, it's not. I don't think actually there are any black people in this episode, or at least as main characters. So there are some Italians, which would probably be the other thing that you probably thought of. A lot of Italians in this episode. So I don't know. Were you super racist or just, I don't know, kind of racist? But I guess the kind of racist fits because you get it. You get it. Anyway. Oh, here we go. See, I told you. It's going to be weird today. 4 stories. Ramadan Abel Rehim Mansour, Murder Incorporated, Giuseppe Greco, and our first story will be of John Birger. Shaknai Itzik Burger. It's probably Burger. I can't figure it out. And here's the thing. I could go on YouTube and just watch a video about this dude and I would probably figure out the pronunciation. I didn't do that. I don't do that much show prep because it's whatever. But Shaknai Itzik Burger was born on February 5th, 1881 to a Jewish family in the Russian Empire. His family soon immigrated to the United States, where he was given the name Charles because Americans were not about to try to pronounce Shaknai or say it on a regular basis. So after spending 4 years in the military, Birger moved to Illinois, got married, and worked as a coal miner. And yes, apparently there were coal mines in Illinois. I don't know if you've ever been to Illinois. Doesn't strike me as a very coal-y place, right? You got Chicago up in the north, that's fine. And then the surrounding, all of the rest of it. To me, at least that I have seen, whether I have flown over it or I have driven through the southern part, it's just all flat farmland. I don't know where these coal mines in Illinois were, but they were. And so following World War I, America decided that alcohol was bad and they adopted prohibition. Birger, however, realized that there was a potential business here being a bootlegger and figured it was going to be a lot safer than being a coal miner, and he's probably not wrong. So he quickly joined the Shelton Brothers, which was an infamous bootlegging gang in southern Illinois at the time. And for the first few months, Birger and the Shelton Brothers fought against police over control of the coal fields and the influence that each side had over bootlegging, whether it was to be like, yeah, alcohol's great, or the police who were like, no, alcohol's bad, whatever. And the coal miners, they're all out there. I guess that, what else were you going to do? Who else were you going to try to impress? Also, by 1923, the Ku Klux Klan had invaded the area, and the Klan was a proud supporter of national prohibition and believed that drinking was, quote, un-American and was an activity only practiced by dirty Catholics and immigrants, which, Catholics and immigrants do drink, but drinking's still American. It is like one of the most American things that you can do because the rest of the drugs are illegal. Drinking is just a thing that everybody does, right? Like most countries, drinking is like the thing to do. So whatever. Since the coal, I don't know where I was going with that, but since the coal fields were the ones that were worked by those same dirty Catholics and immigrants, the Klan made themselves very well known throughout the area and intimidated those people and actively helped the police enforce prohibition. A guy named S. Glenn Young, the unofficial leader of the Klan in Southern Illinois, rounded up a group of as many as 5,000 people and actually went door to door throughout several towns searching for people in possession of alcohol. If they found any, the residents were then forcibly removed from their homes and taken to Klan prisons, which were actually totally legal because the federal government had deputized the KKK to aid in prohibition enforcement. What kind of country did this used to? You people are like, oh, America's so bad. America used to be so great. Let's make America great again. Remember, America used to deputize the KKK to help enforce prohibition. I feel like that's not great. I feel like here's the thing, even if you are not a fan of alcohol, and that's totally your opinion, you can be against alcohol all you want. But to then be in support of giving the KKK weapons and legal authority to arrest people, to enforce a ban on alcohol, I feel like that's a little much. That's a little over the line. But that's the kind of country that America used to be. So maybe it's not that bad. Maybe today with our trans people, it's not that bad. All right. Maybe, the mass shootings is still a big problem. We should probably figure that out. But I mean, oh no, a trans person's using a different bathroom. Our country's gone down the toilet. Shut up. You suck. You stupid. You suck. Oh man. Things are so much better now than they used to be. You get it. Anyway, over the next few months, elected officials we're going to just go back into the story of elected officials believed to be supporting the bootleggers were actually forcibly ousted from their elected positions and were just replaced by more Klansmen. So not only were the KKK basically this mini army enforcing prohibition, but then now they were actually taking over governments. So Glenn Young, along with 3 others, were eventually shot and killed in the middle of a cigar store following a brief shootout with a deputy sheriff. Over 15,000 people attended Young's funeral in support of the KKK, and which is crazy because, this is Southern Illinois. You don't think the KKK. We don't consider, we think the KKK, all right, that's a Southern thing, that's fine. Illinois is probably more Midwest, and we don't, the South definitely doesn't claim Illinois. So 15,000 people, showing up to this Klansman's funeral is wild. In 1926, though, Birger and the Shelton brothers had finally gotten tired of the Klan getting in their way and and interfering with their bootlegging. So they showed up in the town of Herrin, Illinois, with Tommy guns and shotguns with the intention of mowing down as many Klan members as they possibly could. And while a few people were killed because guns just were not that accurate in the 1920s, it wasn't enough to eliminate the Klan's influence in the area. So even though Birger and the Shelton brothers, they staged this mass shooting, or at least tried to, of the Klan. They got a few of them, but it didn't really work. In a few months, the Klan was back to their same ways, being shady and forcibly, arresting people and all that. But in that few months, though, things were pretty great. Unfortunately, without the clan to push around, Birger and the Shelton brothers eventually turned on each other. And while both sides were happy to use crime and violence to get their way, it was basically done with the understanding that they wouldn't impede on each other's home turf. So when a shop owner in Birger's hometown of Harrisburg was robbed, Birger found the thief, who was a member of the Shelton brothers gang, and killed him. By October, the two sides were tired of conventional gang warfare and kind of started getting creative with how they were going to screw around with each other. Both sides converted pickup trucks into tanks by mounting guns on them and outfitting the body with plated armor. The Shelton brothers actually stole airplanes from a nearby airfield and bombed the town, or bombed Shady Rest, which was Birger's own fortified speakeasy, basically with like dynamite wrapped in nitroglycerin. So you got these two gangs basically who they've like at least briefly gotten rid of the KKK, but now they're just fighting each other, and they're doing it in crazy ways. They're like making their own tanks, they're stealing planes and bombing areas around Illinois. In June of 1927, Birger was finally arrested for the murder of Joe Adams, the former mayor of West City, Illinois, who had been shot by two of Birger's associates after Adams had taken one of the Shelton brothers' tanks into his garage for repairs. Birger was convicted of the murder and sentenced to hanging, despite his argument that the fact that he had not even been the one to pull the trigger. He hadn't even been there. That argument might have worked if his trial hadn't been held in Franklin County, which was an area controlled by the Shelton brothers, who used their influence to sway the direction of the trial. So like this whole area is just a mess, right? Because you have the KKK who suck, and they don't want people to be drinking and doing anything that's non-religious in any way. And then the KKK kind of gets squashed for a bit, only to be replaced by these gangs who, you know, sure, people can drink now, but also you got to do the things that they want done. And they're going to sway elections and get rid of people they don't like. It's just a mess. On April 19th, 1928, Birger was escorted to the gallows by a rabbi dressed in all black so as not to be confused with a Klansman, and hanged. So, Birger and the Shelton brothers in Southern Illinois, they've cleaned it all up now, but oh boy, what a mess that place used to be. Our next story here, following the Castellamarese War in the late 1920s, which pitted Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano against each other for control of the Italian-American mafia, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky got really sick of all the gang activities and formed Murder Incorporated in 1931, which doesn't leave a lot to the imagination as to what they were all about. Siegel and Lansky recruited Jewish Italian gangsters from various Brooklyn neighborhoods and mostly worked for Jewish mobster Louis Buckhalter, though they happily accepted murder contracts from all over the country. And that was what they did. They were just like, they were murdered for hire. They were just hitmen, and they were totally open about it because it's the 1920s and 1930s, and this is just what gangsters do. Operating out of Rosie Midnight Rose Gold's candy store in Brooklyn, Murder Inc. was paid anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 for each hit, which they would then use to hire the best lawyers in the country to defend them if they ever got caught. The first big hit came in 1932 when Abe Wagner began acting as an informant to the National Crime Syndicate, which was this broader organization of gangs. It's just like, it's crazy how these gangs operated, and they're like, then there's like gangs of gangs, and they have like their own syndicates, and it's just these organizational hierarchies. Is crazy. Two members, George Young and Joseph Schaefer, tracked Wagner down in Minneapolis even after Wagner had assumed a completely new identity and killed him. Bugsy Siegel, however, failed to get them released from jail following the hit. So that's kind of a problem for Murder Inc. because their whole structure supposed to work didn't. In October 1935, mobster Dutch Schultz decided it was a great idea to put out a hit on Thomas Dewey, a prosecutor who had made his life's mission to take down Murder, Inc. and the rest of the mafia. The National Crime Syndicate, surprisingly, thought that was a bad idea, believing that Dewey's assassination would turn the public's opinion against Murder, Inc., as if that wasn't already the case, and would increase campaigns to get rid of him. So in response, Dutch Schultz just vowed to take Dewey out himself rather than, get a hitman. Because mobsters can't just go rogue without any consequences, the National Crime Syndicate decided they needed to then kill Schultz instead. On October 24th, Schultz and 3 of his associates were murdered at the Palace Chop House in Newark, New Jersey. One of Murder, Inc.'s hitmen, Mindy Weiss, fled the scene in the getaway car before everything was done, which is not what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to sit in the getaway car until all the murder was done and then wait for the murderers to get in the car to then get away, but he leaves early. So in response, the other hitman on the job, Charles Workman, filed a grievance with the NCS, the National Crime Syndicate, who approved the murder of the getaway driver, Seymour Schechter, a few days later. Just a crazy thing. So that's the thing is Mindy Weiss, who fled in the getaway car, he's not even the getaway driver. He just shows up to the hit. He freaks out and he just leaves in the car. And for all of that, the actual getaway driver, Seymour Schechter, got murdered. And it's funny to me how they have, it's the mafia, right? We play by your own rules. I don't know whose accent that was, but it's the mafia, but they have to file these grievances and go through all of this bureaucratic process to get hits approved. It's just so stupid to me. The entire event, which was approved by Louis Buckhalter and saved Dewey's life, ironically allowed Dewey to continue his mission to instead bring Buckhalter and Murder, Inc. down. So essentially, I know a lot of this can feel complicated, or at least it feels complicated to my brain right now. But there were these guys who wanted to bring down Thomas Dewey, who was this prosecutor. He wanted to take down Murder, Inc. People in Murder, Inc. were like, no, we got to assassinate Dewey first. And then they go rogue and they try to get this hit on him. The hit fails. And so then there's people in Murder, Inc. who are like, can we get approval to kill some of our own men? And they were like, yeah, it's probably smart. So then they do that. And then they save the prosecutor's life. And that just means the prosecutor can keep going and trying to take them all down. It's just weird. In 1937, 4 gangsters murdered and dismembered a loan shark just because they thought he was an informant. Didn't really have any evidence. They just thought he was. In October, Murder, Inc. then murdered their own boss's ex-associate Max Rubin after Rubin had disobeyed orders from Buckhalter to disappear to avoid being summoned as a witness in the upcoming trial against him. At this point in 1937, it was estimated that Murder, Inc. had killed as many as 500 people who they mostly thought were doing things they didn't like. Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss, these nicknames are amazing. Alone, this guy, Harry Strauss, was responsible for over 100 murders, which, if that is true, would make him one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of this country. There's just not a lot of evidence to back that up, though. In January 1940, Harry Rudolph, who was working on the side as a police informant, was held as a witness for a murder that had happened back in 1933. During his testimony, Brooklyn District Attorney William O'Dwyer secured murder charges on 3 Murder, Inc. members. One of those men charged with murder, Anthony Meffatori, agreed to cooperate with police and confess to 6 other murders. He also got some other gang members to flip and start working with police, who then issued a ton of first-degree murder charges to various members of Murder, Inc. From there, it seemed like it was pretty easy to just start arresting everyone who was associated with that. And that's what they did. So trials against members of Murder, Inc. began 5 months later with Harry Maione and Frank Abandando. with their ice pick and meat cleaver murder of Whitney Rudnick in the parking garage. Both men were executed at Sing Sing prison on February 19th, 1942. Harry Strauss and Martin Goldstein were then put on trial for murdering and burning Irving Feinstein. They were put on the electric chair on June 12th, 1941. Charles Workman was put on trial for his role in Dutch Schultz's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, but was paroled after 23 years. Louis Buckhalter and 5 others were charged with the murder of a candy store owner. Buckhalter, who had been ordering most of Murder, Inc.'s hits, was found guilty and executed on March 4th, 1944. By the end of the 1940s, almost all of the trials against various Murder, Inc. members had been completed. They'd all either been executed or put in prison for life, and the group basically ended up getting dissolved. But for a good decade or more, they were killing everybody. And as you know, as being named Murder, Inc., I would surely hope so. Our next story here of Giuseppe Greco, who was born on January 4th, 1952 in Ciaculli, Italy, on the island of Sicily. As roughly 83% of Sicilians do, according to this statistic I just made up, Greco joined the mafia and quickly earned a seat on the Sicilian Mafia Commission, which is apparently a real thing, just like the other bureaucratic stuff. That's what's funny to me. It's like these mafia people, and I've said this already, but it bears repeating, right? They're all about, they're playing by their own rules, and they're doing the things, and they don't care what the government says. They're going to do business their way, whatever. But then they also basically operate the same way as the government does. And they have these commissions and organizational hierarchies, and you got to get approval and it's just so stupid. Like, if you're going to do your own thing, have a completely different way of doing it. Don't just do, it's just so silly to me. Greco's uncle, Michel Greco, was the boss of the Ciaculli Mafia and held close ties with the Corleonesi, who would later dominate the Mafia War in Sicily. Beginning in 1981, during the Second Mafia War, Greco earned a reputation as a ruthless gunman, barging into otherwise peaceful settings and spraying his AK-47 all over the place. So it started at the Christmas Massacre in 1981 when Greco killed 3 mafiosi members, including Giovanni De Peri, the boss of the Villabate family. Greco went on to work with Filippo Marchesi, boss of the Corso de Mille neighborhood in the city of Palermo, where he ran a, quote, room of death in which victims were tortured and murdered before being dissolved in acid or dumped into the Mediterranean Sea. The Sicilian and Italian mafias do not play. All right. Look, you get the American mafia, New York, Chicago, they're bad. They just shot people. All right. Granted, I did mention before, someone got murdered with an ice pick and a meat cleaver. And look, most of them were Italian. The Italians just don't play around. All right. And look, here's the thing. Over the course of this show, I think that the Japanese and the Germans have rightly been vilified for a lot of things that they've done in their history. Rightly so. Terrible people. The Italians don't get enough credit. Credit's probably not the right word, but they don't get enough credit for how terrible they actually are. Because Italians, also some of the worst people on the planet. Not even just mafia Italians, not just gangster Italians, but just Italians in general. They suck. Their food is so good. That's the thing, right? Like Germans, it's easy to still hate on Germans because German food, not great. Oh, you got bratwurst. Cool. We still got hot dogs. They're better than yours, right? But you got Italian food, pizza and pasta and all the different kinds of pastas. Oh, you are forgiven because you got good bread with little olive oil and herbs. Oh, yes. And cannolis. I'm not a big fan of cannolis, but people lose their minds over a cannoli. Japanese food, whether it's sushi or some hibachi, some yakisoba noodles. Yes, daddy. Good food. Good food makes everything fine. All right. Oh, you tortured an entire generation of people and murdered them ruthlessly. That's not great, but your food is amazing, so it's fine. At least that's how it seems to me. that we've gone on as a society. Anyway, it's not important. Back to the story. Greco then took part in the Via Carini massacre in 1982, in which he killed 4 high-profile mafia members along with the 15-year-old son of Salvatore Inzerillo after he had promised to avenge his dead father. But rather than leave the boy in the street as a warning to other mafia members, Greco chopped the boy's arm off, shot him in the head, and just dissolved the rest of his body in acid, which is wild to do to a 15-year-old kid who didn't actually do anything wrong. 2 months later, Greco invited Rosario Riccobono, another Palermo mob boss, over to a cookout where he proceeded to kill Riccobono and 8 of his men. The bodies were never found, mostly because Greco fed them to his family's pigs. Although the mafia war started to die down by 1983, Greco himself continued killing people because he was just really good at it. He planted and detonated a car bomb that killed 4 people in a rival family, which made other mobsters in the Ciaculli look up to him and consider him the real boss, while the actual boss, Greco's uncle Michel, was still in hiding. Salvatore Rina, one of the bosses in the Corleonesi family who didn't like how powerful Greco thought he was getting, ordered the massacre of Piazza Scaffa. And in this event, working with insiders in the Ciaculli so as not to inform Greco of the attack and thus making him look weak and ineffective, 8 people in the Ciaculli family were blasted with shotguns to death inside of a barn. Which is crazy. Like, why don't you just kill Greco himself? Why do you have to kill 8 other random people? Like, none of that makes sense. And like, I get and I just explained the reasoning, right? Like, there were people on his side who then started working with the Corleonesi family. They were informants. And so they organized this entire murder to make Greco look weak and ineffective as a leader. Why don't you just, like, you have informants, you know where he's going to be. Just murder Greco. I don't, like, it just seems like just so stupid and so inefficient. On August 6, 1985, police officer Antonio Casara was ambushed and killed by Greco after Casara had issued arrest warrants for 163 members of Greco's family, which is what I don't even know 163 members of mine or my wife's family. And my wife's got a pretty big family. A month later, however, Greco was murdered in his home by 2 of his own men acting on orders from Salvatore Rina. Greco's body was then dissolved in acid. For whatever reason, after this, the Sicilian government decided to put Greco on trial after his death and found him guilty of 58 murders, though it was believed that Greco was responsible for at least 80, if not more than 300. Our final story here is of Ramadan Abel Rehim Mansour, also known as Al Torbini, who was born in Tanta, Egypt in 1980. Because life in any desert country is pretty bleak, Mansour left his home at an early age and joined a street gang. The gang leaders graciously accepted this kid and taught him valuable survival skills and basically also not to screw up, because they would cut him with a razor if he ever made a mistake. And that's how you create a real hardened gangster. Just lots of trauma, lots of really bad trauma. So, Mansour quickly learned that the best way to get revenge on someone was to rape them, which I don't condone that. That's very debatable, but whatever. If the victim said anything about going to police afterwards, he was then taught to murder them. Again, why don't you just do that the first time? That solves all the problems. Over the course of 7 years, Mansour raped and murdered at least 32 kids between ages 10 and 14 in Cairo, Alexandria, Caliuba, and Beni Suef. One of his victims was someone in his own gang. And look, I'm not laughing at the concept of child rape. I'm laughing at this idea that Mansour, like, I hope it would be funnier to me as if Mansour, like, was not a pedophile in this, where it was like, he's just like, oh, I've got these kids keep messing up, and now to teach them a lesson, I got to rape these kids. I'm not even attracted to these kids. These kids are gross, but God, man, my former boss, he told me that's what has to happen. So I don't want to get cut again. Please don't cut me again. Come here. It's just so stupid. Anyway, Eventually, officers in Cairo and Alexandria began keeping their eye on Mansour as his gang lured boys onto the carriage roof of a train, stripped them, and then raped and tortured them. When they were done, the gang would then toss the dead victim off the moving train. Some were thrown into the Nile River, while others who hadn't been killed yet were just buried alive. In 2006, 2 of Mansour's fellow gang members were arrested and immediately snitched on Mansour. After he was then arrested, Mansour told authorities that he had been possessed by a female jinn, which is the Muslim equivalent of a demon, who then commanded him to kill. He and his other gang members were convicted and sentenced to death. Mansour was executed in 2010. Now, here's what's weirder about this story. For some strange reason, Egyptians became oddly fascinated. I don't know why I said it like that. Oddly fascinated with Mansour's child raping gangsters. Many shop owners and rickshaw there we go. I had a stroke. Many shop owners and rickshaw drivers in all over Egypt began changing their names to Al Torbini as a way to attract more customers. Mansour even had a sandwich named after him that the local kids absolutely loved. And that doesn't make any sense. It's like, it would be like Subway coming out with, it would be like if Jared from Subway was like a national hero and Subway had the Jared sandwich. And I don't even know what you put in that. Lots of mayonnaise, probably. Anyway, it's so stupid. And it would be like the kids' meal, and kids would just love it. Like it would be the Happy Meal of this generation. This gangster who raped and tortured children was like this cult hero in Egypt. That's a weird place. All right, some stories of some gangsters in the books. Listen, there's not a lot to learn from this episode other than just like gangs are stupid and they don't make sense. And it's really just a cover up for just wanting to kill people all willy nilly, with your own rules, not the government's rules. So that's it. I'm not even there's no, what did we learn today? That's just it. So we're going to wrap it up with that next week on the show. We're talking about some strikes from history, when people got real mad at their boss because their working environment sucked. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to look at 3 strikes from history. We're looking at the Battle of Blair Mountain, the Haymarket Affair, and the Ludlow Massacre. So if you think your job sucks, tune in next week because these people had it way worse than you do, probably. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.